Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Remember the Jaguar rebrand that everyone talked about last year? We got a chance to talk to Charlotte Blank, US CMO of Jaguar Land Rover, about that, and a whole bunch of other things, including marketing science, JLR's brand management approach, balancing heritage and luxury, how the principles of creative effectiveness helped their campaign with Theo James in the Range Rover Sport ad, and a whole lot more. This episode's been sponsored by Quadical, fractional marketing leadership using evidence-based marketing practices. That's quadical.com.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Mark Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
Welcome back to the Sleeping Barber. This time we've got Charlotte Blank, the US CMO from Jaguar Land Rover North America, joining us. Charlotte, welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, likewise. This is one of the CMO series episodes that we've got, and super excited to have you here. You're, aside from being the US CMO at Jaguar Land Rover, you also are a member of the Board of Trustees at the Advertising Research Foundation, advisory board member at Penn Master Behavioral and Science. Oh, sorry, that's a mouthful. Penn Master of Behavioral and Decision Sciences, Harvard MBA, and just super interested to have you join us. We're going to talk a lot about science and marketing, which seems like an oxymoron in some cases. But it's funny because V and I talk a lot about this, that oftentimes the marketing department is labeled as the coloring department, and they're just people that aren't very serious about business. And so we're grateful to have you here today, because there's so much of what you've done and your background, and we'll get into this, that really roots decision-making in science and specifically in marketing decision-making. So super excited to have you here and joining us on this.
Likewise.
Jaguar Land Rover, I'm just going to refer to as JLR for a little bit.
That is the official name now, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks. But you've had a good run, I would say, in the last little bit, looks like.
Truly,
Yeah.
honestly, record-breaking numbers, particularly in the U.S., really, unprecedented volume, profit. We've been flying high the last year in particular.
Yeah. A friend of ours, a guy named Dan White, a friend of the show, put up a post a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was really interesting, which is serendipitous that you're here. But he talked about how it's really fascinating how some brands go from like this old historic sort of, in your case, the Land Rover farming vehicle and the British countryside kind of idea, a rough and tumble, to it all of a sudden become, not all of a sudden, but seemingly overnight becoming this exotic sort of aspirational luxury brand. And his comment was like, how does that happen? And I just wondered if you have any thoughts around that, because I know it's an intentional plan, but it's fascinating.
I agree. And it's something we talk about nearly every day, striking that right balance of heritage and provenance with forward-looking modern luxury. And getting that, perfect balance is always tricky, and something that we think about in the big picture and in the smallest, decisions that we make. Land Rover in particular has such a rich and fascinating history. Its connection to the royal family. We recently reconnected with our roots this year when we had the opportunity to tour a curated collection of vehicles that had once belonged to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And they were her real vehicles that were painstakingly restored. We had about 10 of them, and we were able to show them around the country, starting with debuting them at Pebble Beach at the famous Monterey Car Week. It was actually the first time an SUV had been displayed on the concourse, so that was a really nice kind of press moment and something befitting Range Rover as the first luxury SUV. But then we brought it all the way over to New York City and had a big, beautiful day celebrating British heritage and luxury and the royal family at Rockefeller Center. And we think it's cool, but we were almost like pleasantly surprised by the turnout and the emotion that we saw from attendees saying like, wait, she actually sat in this car? This isn't,
No way.
This is the detail. There were little hooks that the queen used to have for her handbag, or a special little seat for her corgis to sit. People just love that. There's a real kind of Anglophile connection between the countries. So So it's making us think, how do we kind of bring that through to the right degree where it's not our whole proposition, but it comes through in an appropriate degree. One of our executives had a comment that we want to be a collection of brands with heritage, which is different from being heritage brands that just sort of sit up on a shelf and, look nice and give you fond memories. We want to be an active part of people's future, and provenance can play a role in that, but it's not the whole story.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me too that like marketing science, distinctive brand assets, I'm sure you're familiar with some of that
too.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead then.
No. I love
out.
that line there. Yeah, no, I love that line there, Charlotte, because I think it also kind of speaks to like how does the brand continue to evolve and stay relevant in current days without losing itself in its process. But you have to appreciate like how the amount of distinctive assets that Jaguar does have that have been built over, forgive me because I don't remember how long Jaguar's been in it. You have to, how do you evolve that without disrupting some of that heritage?
Yeah, it's, as I said, a careful balance. I mean, we were just talking about Land Rover and that distinctive asset of that boxy sort of agricultural tough shape becoming sort of a luxury asset now, and something that's very cool in this resurgence of that really boxy, aggressive kind of stance we're seeing from competitors. We're seeing that whole market grow
everywhere.
Yeah, and a lot of interest in the classic vehicles themselves and those being retrofitted and enhanced. So we know that that distinctive asset is the right word and something that we bring to life, even using that as sort of a silhouette along with the Defender word mark, because we're trying to introduce Defender as a brand of its own in our house of brand strategy, where Land Rover, we no longer really go to market as Land Rover. That's more like a parent name, so that Range Rover and Defender in particular can live independently as their own distinct brands with their own distinct cultures and brand language, and they're sort of in a sense equally luxurious, but with very different flavors of what modern luxury looks like. But that distinctive asset is a key part of it. And you mentioned Jaguar as well, and I'm sure we'll talk more about Jaguar, but same there, like really getting back to the roots of copy nothing. That line of we are a copy of nothing was an original Jaguar designer line from decades ago. And that notion of being niche and edgy and avant-garde and truly a copy of nothing and about celebrating originality is ultimately the core of the brand ethos, and one that may have gotten diluted in parts of our history as it grew. So the new transformation was about going back to like what's the very truest thing about Jaguar, and it's that true sense of originality. So I think your question about how brands kind of strike the balance of heritage and legacy, but bringing it forward to modern audiences, it always comes back to that human truth, or that distinctive kind of position at the center.
That's a good point.
Yeah, like the British tire, like, and again, thinking about the evolution of, and we'll go to Jaguar at some point soon, but just that Range Rover evolution, well, not just for Range Rover, but all the brands, going from, again, that farming idea. Like I keep watching F1, and I forget the guy, Christian Horner is driving around all the time on his old vintage, Range or Land Rover kind of thing. So it's like, it's still one of these
iconic,
like it's a timepiece almost, right?
Truly. Mm-hmm.
And then you see the things that you've got now, the vehicles you've got now, and they're related, but they're definitely rooted in the Britishness. And as you imagine growing a brand and becoming more global, it would be easy to go, well, we're going into the US, or we're going into Canada, we're going into South America. Like, let's get rid of the British thing. But you guys have retained that connection and retained that link to the history, right? The heritage part.
Yeah, we keep Britishness as a key ingredient in a rich palette of flavors.
Right.
For Range Rover, we have such nowadays, and we'll talk about science a lot and how we use psychological insights to really understand and differentiate our brands. We have a really good, crisp sense of the American Range Rover buyer and target audience and what motivates them. And there is something truly American about them in their sense of drive and entrepreneurialism and sort of gritty, vertically focused, kind of drive towards success.
Yeah.
There's something just quintessentially American about that drive that we observe in our very entrepreneurial Range Rover audience. So I really want to elevate that and kind of create more content and programming and interactive programs that speak to that entrepreneurial nature, but all while we maintain that that sense of prestige, or that, this is a luxury brand that comes from England, or it's a, luxury brand that has other attributes that really make it special, just as when you buy a luxury watch, that's a part of the story.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's such a great story.
It is an incredible story, actually. We're going to step into the Wayback Machine a little bit here, Charlotte. So humor me for a second. You easily have one of the most interesting backgrounds for a CMO, and at least from what like Mark and I have actually, come across. Can you tell us a little bit about your path from science to CMO?
Thank you. I describe myself and my interests, I guess, as marketing by way of psychology. And I really see the two as so deeply intertwined. And it's something that, as I discuss with colleagues, an interest in human behavior and understanding and influencing human behavior is essentially the core of what marketing is. So it's kind of what drives me in both areas. I've found through my academic and professional career kind of going back and forth in terms of where I major versus minor, so to speak, and like where I really focus. Undergrad neuroscience and then going into media right away at Turner Broadcasting, MBA, right into the automotive industry at General Motors, back into more of an academic space as a behavioral science lead for an incentive organization called Merits, and then back to the direct brand side at JLR. So I think major and minor is kind of a helpful frame because it's either, I've been directly in the academic work, focusing on experimentation and research and writing case studies and papers and speaking about science, and then trying to push the boundary about how it can bleed into the applied space and get practitioners to use this work. Whereas, now that I'm in the marketer's seat, wearing the marketer's hat, it's, my primary job is to create brand value and desirable growth of our brands. And I feel that the best way to do that is by pulling from my scientist toolkit. So I'm still, have one foot in that space. And yeah. But that's really what drives me. That's what I've always, as long as I can remember, have been passionate about understanding and influencing human behavior. There's just, and never gets tired, and there's always new discoveries every day.
Yeah, it's so, yeah. And like in marketing, I have a similar background, not exactly the same, but I grew up in science and then did a whole bunch of years in pharma. And then when I got into business advertising, I was fascinated by how many people didn't read journals just because that was what I was so used to. And then as it turns out, there's all kinds of stuff about science in marketing science that's been published. And so from your background and looking at the kinds of things that you're working on, and like we met originally through The Gathering, there was a conference in Banff, and you had given a presentation on marketing science and science-based decisions and evidence-based decisions, which was so interesting. How does your background influence the way you see how marketing works and how advertising works and brand building? Really
in every way. I mean, I think first and foremost, a colleague I had in the behavioral science world said that behavioral science is a verb, not a noun. It's not about, labeling things from your, bag of heuristics or biases, but it's about conducting experiments and behaving like a scientist would, which namely means, having a hypothesis, using the data available to you to inform your ideas and your hypotheses, and then designing controlled experiments to see the effect of those ideas. And it's that practice of acting like a scientist that I think is the most important element here. And this is where marketing, and particularly digital marketing, is already advanced. We have, when to buy advertising in the performance marketing machines of the world means to be running constant A/B tests and multivariate tests, and they're always trying multiple versions of something to see what works best and why. But I think it's that why piece and informing, what is it that we're testing in the first place, rather than just what happens if I move this important button from the bottom of the page to the top of the page. Getting at like more of a deeper insight, a psychologically driven idea to test, I think is where we're starting to push the boundary and come up with some new, really interesting ideas. And the time is right, as JLR has been embarking on this house of brand strategy and really pulling apart, in particular, the Range Rover and Defender brands. It requires us to think much more deeply about our consumers, because on the surface, at a demographic level, they both look relatively similar. We see, really high household income. We see them living in major metro areas, enjoying somewhat similar activities. There are some differences, but it's like you go down a level deeper. You start to ask people, what drives you and what motivates you and where do you spend your time? And that's where you start to see a little more separation, where the Range Rover audiences of the world are, really active in investing as a hobby and participate in sailing and equestrian activities and wildly over-index as entrepreneurs and starting their own business. Those are things that people can tell us about their lives, and that gives us another layer of insight, whereas on the Defender side, we start to really see outdoor adventure and activity and hardcore sport and fitness optimization really pop for them. So it's like we're getting a layer closer. But this year, and what we talked about at the BAMF conference at the gathering, was about really going deep under the hood to see like what actually motivates people. And this is where we've done some really interesting work with a group of behavioral scientists to study people at scale and actually administer psychological tests that look at hundreds of academically validated psychological traits, map people across all of these arrays of tests, and then layer on stimulus that we give them about our brands and start to identify predictive correlations where certain things really pop only for Defender. People who are likely to consider buying a Defender really could be predicted by this handful of traits, which look distinct from people who are likely to consider, say, a Range Rover Sport. And when we start to get at those things, we're like, oh, that both validates and gives some color behind some of those hobbies and demographic differences we had observed, but also gives us, a much richer palette of insight to use to inform briefs and inform hypotheses to try different calls to action or different language in our digital advertising. So I think the example we talked about at the gathering was for Range Rover Sport, which the insight that really pops for Range Rover Sport and not for our other brands and not for any of Sport's competitors is a sense of impulsivity and the inability to delay gratification. It's just kind of go after it and get what you want to get done today. Get that car. Don't make a bunch of spreadsheets and go shopping across a bunch of dealerships. These people they just kind of go for it. And that is a really distinct predictive trait about Range Rover Sport that we've it made sense to us, and it sort of underscored some of the hobbies that we've seen, but gives us new language to use. And so we were able to validate that hypothesis with a series of tests that actually looked at using language like visceral, for example, which means like going with your gut, actually drives greater behavior online, and not just like clicking on an ad, but actually visiting our site and performing high value actions like configuring a car, which tells us that not only did the ad grab their attention, but it's actually attracting the people who we know resonate with our brand.
Yeah.
So this stuff works, so to speak. It's that scientific method of actually testing, not just taking the idea at face value, but it's so easy now to run a test and compare one versus status quo.
I wonder, as a part of these studies, and obviously, these new insights that came through, it probably helped inform a lot of the category entry points, or likely maybe reevaluated the way you were thinking about them as well. Was there anything outside of that maybe allowed you to restructure how you went to market, not only by the use of language, like you talked about visceral and things like that, but was there anything else that came out of the studies from that perspective that informed how you approach the category?
And now a short word from our sponsor.
This episode was sponsored by Quadical. Quadical. Did I say that right? Quadical?
You did. Quadical. Yeah.
Quadical. Mark, what is it?
Well, V, I'm glad you asked. Quadical is my own company, actually. So, I'm the Sleeping Barber podcast co-host with you, but I also have my own company. And so I'm happy to sponsor the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Love that.
Because I give so much time to it. But Quadical is a fractional marketing leadership firm where we specialize in evidence-based marketing. And we do consulting work for companies typically between $30 to $300 million, and helping them navigate some of the challenges that people have, like, I know something's broken, but I'm not quite sure how to fix it, nor do I have the time to fix it. Fair. And so that's where we help out a lot of people.
Well, I'll speak for Mark as well, because you're wearing your Quadical hat right now. We appreciate your sponsorship of the Sleeping Barber podcast. And for all of those that may be interested, we do have a whole bunch of sponsorship options. Always looking to bring on new sponsors. We have a lot of creative ideas that can really help across a global audience.
Thanks, V.
No, thank you, Quadical. We appreciate your business.
And now back to the show.
Maybe one idea could be the Range Rover insight about entrepreneurialism that we knew, we had from sort of existing demographic research. They over-index by like over 6 times versus other luxury automotive brands to be owners or founders of a business. And that's a useful fact about people. But when we dug into the psychological research, it sort of gives all this other flavor about how people experience that lifestyle, and the combination of the pressure that they put on themselves to really conquer and to be the best and to find success and achievement in their own right, to bet on themselves. It's both, a thrilling and sort of confidence instilling notion, but it's also opens up a bit of vulnerability and a sense of that perfectionism brings, being a little bit self-critical to the point of anxiety. And the complement to that is they're highly intellectually open, like they're really interested in liking the car, and that community, that audience that's really involved in sort of the athletic world resonates well with it. So that was a nice kind of turn. And then more recently, the global team also showcased one of the concept vehicles in Paris at Paris Fashion Week, and involved really, I think, really appropriate celebrity involvement with Zoe Saldana, Barry Keogh, Jamie Dornan. Is gorgeous people, gorgeous car. That's one of those. It's not rocket science, but it's a thing that works. And they just looked so good. And the way the car was, debuted in that electric blue that had everyone talking. That's what, that was that kind of missing piece that it's starting to really come to life. But, you asked about the psychology, and we have done some really, the same partners have helped us with the psychological research on people who specifically resonate with this concept vehicle. Strip away the advertising or the brand discussion and just look at the car and what the design language, which we've only shown a concept vehicle at this point, but I can assure you that the production one will look similar enough. It carries through a lot of that design language, and it's very different. It is a copy of nothing. Chief Creative Officer said in Miami, it's not for everyone. Some will love it now, some will love it later, and some will never love it. And that's what we want. And that came through the psychological predictors for this audience, where that they're really cognitive flexibility, like they're able to expand their definition of what a car should look like and what an electric car should look like and what a person should look like. They're able to think creatively in a more abstract way, really, really status conscious, and love to show off their own unique style. We just saw kind of ticking through all of these traits that really felt right, that really was exactly what we were going for with this new car. So I'm very excited to keep this rolling and see where it goes in the next couple of years.
You talked about,
Go ahead,
this is very interesting. And you talked about the global audience. You talked about, how the global team is approaching that. I just going back to a little bit, one of the things that you were talking about, the nuances between the US market and say the European market or UK market. Have you been able to see a different level of affinity or desire by the communities based in, if they're based in the US versus say Europe, or do you see it's now people are almost equally coming around to, now that they've kind of seen it a little bit more front and center?
Specific to the new Jaguar brand?
Yes.
I have not yet looked at that. That is on our testing map. Selfishly, I was like, let's get this right in the US. But I think this is a global phenomenon, because the love for Jaguar and the history for Jaguar is even deeper and richer in the UK than it is in the US, I would think. So, it's potentially an even bigger and more painful change for some. So I could see that. I think that this has been a global experience for us all to kind of hold hands and go into the future together.
Might be another episode.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask about too with the Jaguar thing is, when it comes to an idea like this new rebrand and the science and the evidence and the research you've been doing in the background, he and I have talked a lot about sort of big M marketing versus small M marketing. Big M meaning like the 4 Ps, product, price, place, promotion, and then small M just meaning advertising.
Totally.
It seems to me there's a lot of opportunity for a marketing department such as yourselves, who are keen and interested in understanding consumer insights and the psychology and all that, to provide big M marketing services to an organization whereby you can help understand and help shape the product development based on consumer needs, based on consumer patterns and behaviors and purchases, past purchases and things like that, so that you get a product that is better accepted by the market, has better product market fit, has a definitive area that is a service for a specific group of market and creates that differentiation. Is that a contribution that your team has made to the organization as well?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say, within my remit as the CMO, most of my team are not to denigrate, but the small M, in the comms space, brand experience, creative development, et cetera. But we also have responsibility for research, consumer insight in general, as well as the data science practice, which is just growing and involved in everything. And so, yes, I mean, influencing the product to some extent, that's really difficult because, the speed at which consumer insights come in and that the speed with which we can change our comms is so different from the development timeline and cycle for a product, but they need to go hand in hand and stay close to one another. And so, one thing that comes to mind is for Defender, one thing we hear from customers is that an appreciation for the ruggedness and the sort of analog elements of it, like the touch and feel of a solid knob to change a setting. Is meaningful to the brand and to the experience of driving a Defender, or maybe more importantly, the actual technical capability of the vehicle. The fact that it can wade in up to like almost 3 feet of water is insane. And it's something that basically no one will ever have to do. I hope no one ever has to do that. I do have some colleagues who've been here through, some of the unfortunate hurricanes and floods we've had. But it's one of those truisms where you buy a product not for its, functional benefits, but for the psychological ones. It's just cool to say that I could do that. I could that ford a river in my Defender. I could, camp out under the stars on the top. And many people do that. We do have a sizable community of off-roaders and campers, but for the suburban moms like me, I just feel cool having it in my driveway. And I think it looks cool when it has those accessories on it. I think that's, kind of a simple example of how the research and the communication loop kind of enforces that. But I think another way that your point really comes through is in the retail and digital shopping experience. That's been a really important transformation underway for the whole automotive industry. Is like, how can we partner with our retailers to create more of a seamless omni-channel experience for our clients? Because these are luxury customers who are used to being able to start, stop, or continue their process, maybe from the comfort of their couch on their phone, maybe from their office computer, maybe they want to go into the store and ask a question or do a test drive. It's a mix of everything. So we need to make it feel seamless so that we can meet you where you are. And that's really challenging for automotive in particular when we work with a network of franchise retailers, each of whom have their own processes, their own technology. So how do we make all those pieces fit together? That was my role when I first started at JLR in transformation. And it was fascinating about the psychology you asked about, because it's complicated from a technical standpoint, but just as much of a human endeavor of bringing our retailers on board so that we're all working toward a common goal and making that a seamless process for people. So that's a big focus for our company as well.
Yeah, I can imagine that's such a big, challenging task, especially with the franchise components. Everyone wants to work towards the same goal, but just even as you mentioned, the systems and processes that everybody has could be totally different than the next dealership down the road, right?
It's really challenging.
Yeah.
I know we only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to be mindful here. The one question that's kind of burning for me, and maybe more of your opinion here, but when we think about your scientific approach, do you believe it actually helps with the 3 core challenges we as marketers continue to face from a day-to-day perspective? Things like defending budget, justifying ROI, balancing those investments between short-term and long-term. How do you see it playing in the 3 areas?
Yeah, that is the question we all struggle with. I will say this year we're standing up our marketing mix model, and
nice.
I feel for our partners there because we have so many hopes and eggs in that basket. It's almost become an inside joke that whatever tough question comes around, we're like, the MMM,
They'll answer every.
So our data
It
team is like,
solves all
guys.
problems.
Yeah. So we'll have to right size our expectations, but I am really excited about that. We're working with a great partner, and we've just gotten through the really heavy lift of pulling together all this
the
data.
data.
We've decades of spend data and the different brands, and it's tricky because our house of brand strategy is new. What can you is it apples to apples to look at Land Rover of the past to Defender of the last couple of years? So many interesting questions that I think will save us a lot of just time in the short term of like for those budgeting conversations, whether it's defending budget or interestingly the reverse of that, like kind of right sizing the expectation of how advertising works and how ad spend translates to sales, because sometimes we actually have a good problem where there's an expectation that money in the system produces more cars tomorrow. And it's like, well, we need hold on. It depends on there's so many nuances and variables. It depends on which model and how old it is and what the inventory situation's like and what competitors are doing and pricing and incentives. So all of that stuff can go into the model and help us scenario plan. So I'm really, really excited about that. But also when we get questions, I think another very common challenge for marketers is that idea that like everyone has an opinion and everyone's a marketer. I don't go correct my finance colleagues or my sales colleagues overseas and say, why'd you build your model that way? People have opinions, and I give my unwanted opinion all the time on creative decisions, I'm sure. But that kind of subjective discussion doesn't need to be so subjective anymore. Now that we can test, we can try, and we could say, okay, I don't agree, but let's see what happens if we run an A/B test. Does it change opinion? So that has been, I think, one of the most helpful things for us in my kind of sphere.
So interesting.
Yeah, it is.
The MMM will fix everything.
Yeah.
We're going through
the answer to it.
Right
it's the crystal ball.
Yeah.
And super appreciative of your time, Charlotte. Thanks for joining us.
Incredible.
How can people find out more about you and the work you're doing and what you're up to?
We have all the social channels. We have the global,
Check.
Instagram, etc. for each of the 4 brands, Range Rover, Defender, Discovery, and Jaguar. Personally, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not, super active, but I'm on there. Charlotte Blank. That's about all you need.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. This is really so fascinating. The whole
great to meet you guys.
Thank
I'm
you.
so glad we connected at the gathering.
Yeah, likewise. Take care.
See you next time.
Bye.
If you like this show, please leave a review. And even if you didn't, we'd love to make this show better, and your feedback will help us do that.
Welcome to the Postpod. We need someone to create a nice jingle for us.
That'd be great.
Anyone out there? Come on.
No, well, I have that guitar that I keep talking about
it.
Yeah, but I just never get around. I'm not a songwriter, B. Is ultimately what this comes down to. One day I'm going to surprise you with something, though.
What? Do it, man. Charlotte Blank. What an incredible conversation.
So good. Yeah,
I
really.
I don't even know. Go.
No, it's so interesting from top to bottom for me. Like the whole approach that she has and the mentality and the thinking. Like for me, we've talked a lot about CMOs, CEOs, CFO relationships and all that kind of thing. And to me, like having someone like that, it just inspires confidence.
100%.
I think, you've got this person with a framework and a model, and like it's not about I know the right answer. It's like we can get an answer and we can de-risk our decisions.
Totally.
Through science. Like let's learn, let's test, all that. It's so interesting and refreshing.
And I just feel like when you take that approach and you get buy-in, it just makes things easier.
Yeah.
Because you remove emotion out of it, right? You remove your opinions out of it. It's like it's rooted in data. It's rooted in science. And if a brand like JLR is going through this massive shift, Land Rover, Jaguar, you almost need to go in that direction to help achieve that buy-in. Because in the absence of that, you're just, at least
a lot of opinion.
You're just dealing with a lot of opinions. Like, well, think about the Jaguar rebrand in of itself. That had to go against a lot of internal biases that may have existed about the brand. They should talk about the racing green, right? The heritage. But the insight, like those people aren't even buying Jaguar anymore. Where does that live in the ecosystem? Like, how does that redefine the brand and its direction where it needs to be going instead? because they still need to sell cars.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know. And I think you and I were both, I remember when we were originally talking about this, is like, we probably don't have the whole story as a community, and there's a big overreaction. And I think today proved just that. Like there is some method to this process in its entirety.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was really refreshing. I've really enjoyed like the thoughtful approach that they're taking to all their brands. I got to say, the Defender, it also just looks incredible. It looks amazing.
Yeah.
I want one. I can't afford
it
one,
looks really
but
cool.
I want one.
Yeah, the Range Rover one. There's so many of those, it seems, around, which is crazy because they're not giving them.
Oh, no. I wish we could give everybody like, use this code, Sleeping Barber.
As part of the
10% off your next GLR purchase.
Yeah.
JLR, sorry.
Yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, anyway, I just, it was such an interesting conversation. She had said something too about coming back to Dan's question around like, how does a brand rebrand itself and become something more than what it used to be? And I really like that. I forget exactly how she said it, but something like we're a luxury brand with a heritage instead of it being a heritage brand with luxury products.
Totally.
I think sometimes the little, like, I don't know if you call that a moniker or whatever you want to call that, but just a positioning statement is really interesting because it allows you a lot more freedom when you think of it that way, that to pursue luxury ahead of it just having this heritage and getting locked into the mentality of the heritage. It's a platform to inspire change instead of it being a limiting step.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that, well, we'll probably pull it out as a quote from the episode, but when she did say that, it's like, it's not just about putting it on the shelf.
Yeah.
And I think that for me really personified this new direction. And, at the end of the day, you need to be honoring that heritage. We talked about the distinctive brand assets and things to that effect, but how do you continue to propel these brands forward to make them still relevant today? Even though there is this lasting heritage that no one can ignore.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other one for me, well, there's lots of things that stick out.
There's a lot.
But yeah, there's a lot. I'll have to go back and replay it all just to hear it again. But again, the Theo James spot featuring the Range Rover Sport vehicle, just the backstory on that, I just find fascinating. The strategy of how you got to the final version of that is so interesting. And it's just thinking about the cast and then the vehicle and then the rental fees for that castle. They're like, I'm sure that's not a cheap commercial either, but making it so that you're getting the best bang for your buck from that creative, knowing that the creative is going to be such an important targeting tool and a honing beacon, and making sure you're getting that right through small edits, like those half-second changes she was talking about in some cases. Super interesting hearing the background of that.
Or the fact that they had to do two versions, one for the UK, one for the US, right? Alone did really well in their specific segments, but there wasn't one that was just used globally. Yeah. And I think, again, it also speaks like to the nuances that exist culturally. Yeah. Especially with these global brands, you have to make sure that you're thinking about that a little bit. And it's not just like here's what, maybe Coca-Cola is different. And even though they do regionalization, even at the global level and things like that, but just the thought process and going back to the testing and why testing is important, I think is one of those things that we can't ever really lose sight on as marketers. And I think especially creatively, sometimes we do lean on opinions more than just kind of some of the facts and data. And obviously you can't go wrong. You need to go off of something.
Yeah, totally. Anything that sticks out for you?
I know we kind of ended with this, but taking that scientific approach and helping like the three core challenges, the defending budget, justifying ROI, balancing budgets between short and long term. I think that it's great to hear that people like Charlotte are implementing these ideas to help in these areas as well, because all too often a lot of us just go back to what we've done, what we've come to know, and instead of kind of looking outside of what what we know today and spending more time on the science side a little bit, I think just helps us in that fact. So for me, it was just great to hear like a big brand like JLR is doing that. So I can really appreciate the complexity that involves. She talked about the MMM that's coming, and we internally just gone back like 3 years right now, but they were talking about they're going back decades, right? That data pull has got to be an interesting one, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall when those insights come out to see like how things have, evolved over time. But it's fascinating that, again, to use the tools that you have in your toolkit. And I think we've been talking about the overinvestments on, say, the traditional more performance marketing side, moving away, using MMMs to help remodel a little bit. I should talk about like the psychology element, which is so important in marketing today than ever before. I really wanted to pick at that even more. I bet you we could have done the whole episode just on that, like the study what were those insights that came out of that study? How did it inform category entry points, etc. But so much, man. There's just such a great episode.
It was really awesome. Yeah. And the other thing that stuck out for me with the defending budget, justifying ROI, and balancing short and long kind of thing was the absence of something, which was, I mean, this sounds obvious, but she didn't talk about last click attribution. She didn't talk about, you know what I mean? Like a data-driven model on digital channels. She mentioned they're doing stuff like product placement at the NBA All-Star game and experiential kind of things. And those things don't have a click associated with them.
It's
right.
But
marketing. And they're just really culturally important for the relevance of the brand. And the play on the earned media impact of those kinds of things. It's hard to measure that on a digital channel. And I think it's really interesting hearing her thoughts on that.
Yeah. And obviously it's working, they're doing really well, record-breaking revenue, profits, etc. So obviously they're headed in the right direction. I think she was right not to just, say marketing was the catalyst or the reason why.
I mean, the products are great.
The products are great.
Yeah. The pricing is on point for the product that it is.
Not for me, but yes.
Yeah. And then like the availability of it. She mentioned too, the industry availability or like availability of the product, which will also, I'm sure, change in the future. There's some news around tariffs and whatnot, but all that stuff matters when it comes to like, can we drive revenue? Well, a lot of it depends. Is the product available?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
cool.
Good.
Jaguar, do you want to talk about Jaguar just quickly?
Oh, yeah.
Love the backstory there as well. I think it's still going to be quite a polarizing product. I think even though like maybe they're able to start to find that niche a little bit.
Yeah.
I still think there's a lot more work to do because I think she was right in recognizing that Jaguar of the two brands probably has even more heritage, especially in the UK. So it'll be interesting how that continues to evolve, I think, in my opinion. I know right now it's like a concept car, and usually there's sometimes the concept cars versus like the actual production vehicles, there's quite a difference between the two, and you see parts of it. She didn't mention that there's a lot more that's being carried through into the production car. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes to life. We didn't get a chance to talk about like the uniqueness though of using things like was it Fashion Week in Paris? I don't remember what it was called, but like using these different forums to launch vehicles versus what would have been a traditional launch in a trade show or one of the big ones, the SEMAs and things like that. So yeah, I'm here for it. I want to see how this continues to roll out. Fascinated again by the backstory about how this all came down, but it's what we said earlier. There was we didn't have the whole story. And I think there was a big overreaction by the community.
Yeah. And I for me, like, I'm not a car guy. I drive a Honda Pilot, which is a great car, but it's not something like I've never been super interested in cars. So the history and like, other than some of the bigger name ones, like I know Ferraris and Lamborghinis, I've heard of Jaguar obviously, but I don't have I'm not invested in any kind of car brands per se.
Yeah.
So severing the historical tie to some of the distinctive assets they've had and the history of the brand, all that kind of stuff. As a marketer, I would say like there's all those things that we talked about in the past too, which would be, there's risk to doing that. But as a guy who's not a car guy, like, yeah, it's a new car. Cool. You know what I mean? Like,
do I like it? Yes or no?
Yeah. Like, I think, would I buy it? That's a whole other question. I think that's kind of the idea around the rebrand itself, which is to say that similar to their tagline with the other things about, a luxury brand, but with heritage. There's a heritage there. But I think they're trying to find new markets. They're trying to find, I get the point. There's a whole bunch of people that have never bought Jaguar before and have no historical connection to it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And I think from other reports we've read, it seems like the brand was on decline as it was over the last few years. So it's a big opportunity, I think, for them to revitalize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No.
Interesting.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. And I hope it does insanely well.
Couldn't agree more. Charlotte, if you're listening,
yeah.
Thanks again for an incredible conversation. I know I speak for Mark. There are some incredible insights there, and we appreciate you kind of pulling back the curtain on JLR there for us. It was a great discussion.
Yeah. And with that, V, I hear the Vitamix of profit spinning upstairs.
The only thing I hear is the little footsteps of my daughter running in the kitchen right now. So it's like, take it. It's amazing.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.